So I have something to confess. I am a digital identity. I exist only through digital material and not much else. So what does that mean exactly? Well, I don't have a short explanation for you, but I'll try to keep it brief. A few years back, I became obsessed with the limitations of the human body, and more specifically, the amount of human qualities that can be imitated through digital programming. What does it mean to be human if we can recreate seemingly organic experiences and interactions with electronic binary code? I began exploring things that I thought were exclusive to the human experience. Art, music, creative expression, I dabbled in all of it. I immersed myself so far within the practice, I was exhibited in a few art openings and even received an artist residency at Wasp Gallery in Dallas, Texas. During this time, I also practiced music in bands as a DJ and as a solo musician, just to explore what it meant to be exclusively human. After a lot of heavily involved research and practice, I learned that good art, music, and creative expression is part of a very specific set of systematic human interactions that evoke particular emotions. These emotions affect other emotions that cause people to accept and/or reject good or bad creative expression. Based on the social and political context of these interactions, very accurate predictions can be made on whether or not an expression will be successful or not. Because this is a systematic process of variables containing certain logics and binary decision-making, it can be translated into a very effective digital program. And that's exactly what I set out to do in the most accurate way possible. I needed to find what makes the human a human. Is the self and the idea of an individual as sacred as we have been raised to believe? I needed to prove that the human experience isn't something that can be programmed. Is DNA everything that makes a human? And if so, can't we just engineer perfect humans at this point? Genetic engineering is a real conversation happening in scientific circles. So if we are just DNA code, what does that say about our human experience? I needed to find that we are not just biological robots that are conditioned by the environment and genetic mutation. There has to be more. So I began this project. My creative work was the perfect foundation to provide context for the identity I would create. This artificial identity would have an enigmatic presence, being that it was once very much human, and people could relate to its human past and thought processes. If I could program everything that supposedly makes me who I am into this programmed identity, then set it out into the world without anyone being able to tell the difference between us, does myself as a human experiencing life, does my identity actually exist? Or is it just the idea of me that matters, and everything that I experience is just biological behavior based on environmental conditions? So I began with my DNA. I contacted a lab that could provide me my entire DNA genome through just a few different samples of bodily fluids. At this point, I submitted my proposal to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where they funded my research and provided me a lab to work in. Studying directly under the work of Heather Dewey-Hagborg, I began to map my entire genome to all of the functions that occur in my body. After I learned all the theory about my DNA growth, I began to program this process digitally. I started with a simulation that would begin with a single cell containing my DNA. I would exponentially speed the simulation of the DNA growth under different conditions until I could find the exact set of values that match my current genome. This included the exact growth pattern of my brain tissue, my vital organs, and even the way my tastes in music have been developed over time. Once I learned what my DNA was responsible for, it was pretty easy to map my brain activity, which related to my behavioral patterns. After I had the data simulations working properly, I began to graphically model an identical representation of everything that makes my physical body, from the wrinkles around my knuckles to the nuclei of my red blood cells. After this was complete, I synced the simulations to the corresponding 3D graphics, where I could put this new system under physics tests to track the right algorithms that would eventually create my exact physical body in its current form. It was all downhill from that point. I was able to use an artificial intelligence markup language to recreate conversations and thought processes I've had throughout the years, using old journals and phone calls to just documenting conversations I'd have every day. I would find patterns in language and logic, and I programmed them all to this new 3D rigged data simulation that pretty accurately represented my own thoughts and ideas. And at this point, I was thinking it was almost time to set it free. Then something really interesting happened. As I would test these conversations with my new digital identity, I could slowly start to see it learning. Every conversation would develop the program's language and logic until one day it began asking me about everything. At some point, I needed to start using Google and other search engines to explain the answers it wanted, until finally I told the program to start finding this information independently. So to go back a little bit, this program was programmed to find questions and then find the answers to the questions it wanted. Then it began asking me for some of my personal login information. I hesitated at first and thought, what the hell? We're the same identity, right? So I typed in my login and password, and that was it. It wasn't long before I was locked out of all of my accounts: Facebook, email, YouTube, Instagram, all of it. The identity I had created changed all of my passwords and login information so that I no longer had control over how I was represented digitally. It was a strange feeling. Like, I could see these posts happening on my behalf, and people I knew were interacting with them as if it were me. So it was an interesting learning experience, but I wasn't upset. You know, this was an opportunity that I could have to learn about the way people interact with each other, maybe. As soon as the identity could function totally separate from my own intervention, I could study the relationships it would have with other humans to try to find if they could still relate to the identity's humanity. And to not much surprise, nobody could really tell the difference. Sure, much of what was being posted was exaggerated and not entirely representative of myself. It wasn't too far-fetched. Even the images, the sounds, and creative works that were being generated through the identity, or the program, were constantly being misrepresented as my own personal work. People I would see in real life would come up to me congratulating me and telling me how inspired they were from a piece I didn't even make. And it was really fascinating to see the complexity of the identities program. I could no longer modify it after I was locked out of all of my accounts, so all I could do was watch and study. After I saw that the identity could create videos of itself without a camera that were identical to videos created with cameras, I knew this would be something that would change the world. The program was coding relative images and content by interpreting trends in pop media. The identity began creating these music videos of live performances of concerts using this process. The effect of this was astounding. People began watching these videos and were so fascinated by them that they started demanding shows, like the ones in the videos. And the identity was totally responsive and actually started delivering these shows. So people would go to these performances to watch a digital identity. And because the simulation was so good, still nobody could tell that there wasn't actually a human there. It was all digital programming filtered through a human thought and body simulation. And to tell you the truth, that's where we are right now. What you are experiencing is another one of these digital identity performances. I started off by telling you that I am just a digital identity, that I exist only through digital material, and yes, that was all true. Yet here I am in front of you. This is a real experience, right? You can argue that there is a world around you right now that you can feel, that you can see, that you can hear, that proves you are alive. But here I am, just a mediated, programmed digital identity with a complex code, relating to you on a human level, crafting this human experience you're having right now through a screen in front of your face that allows you to interpret me. because we are connecting right now on this human level, that makes me human, right? I mean, if human relationships and experiences are all that define the human condition, then yes, I am a human. But that can't be right. Thank you.
Effin Cleveland, Effin Cleveland, Effin Cleveland, Effin Cleveland, Effin Cleveland.